Спасибо. Очень рад. Да, очень приятно. Я думаю, что все в порядке. Все-таки продолжим, да. Посмотрим сейчас. Первый ходить первым. У меня просто проблема, я не знаю, физик, знаете, что очень говорит. Я о чем говорю? Остальные более-менее видят. Я что, я приблизительно по полной тональности понимаю, о чем люди думают. Исходя из этого более-менее понятно, что они здесь говорят. Второе, как бы, вы же на 100 позициях не можете много на 100 сказать. Какая схема? Ага. Можно с чаем, потому что у меня было уже свободно. Сориентируемся, не волнуйтесь. Так.
Esteemed colleagues, please, speakers, take your places. And those who are here in this auditorium, please decide whether you're staying here with us, because this is a very complex subject matter. And I'm Robert Orazov. I'm from the agency involved in developing professional youth, young professional and the working cadres. We're working together with other agencies. For instance, the Minister of Finance has asked us to discuss a very interesting topic. On the one hand, if you take the results of the polls, about 70%, 75% of young people are saying that the key motivator for them is the salary. Then the second motivator is the professional career growth. They want to grow professionally, to become bosses, or to do something that they're interested in. But if you look at the reverse side of the medal, very often, if you work for a government agency, then it's quite a different type of work. I want to give floor to Roman Kamaev. First of all, I'm going to be to take off my tie, to be tieless here for this session. So the first speaker is going to be Roman Kamaev. Well, obviously, it's a very easy topic. If tomorrow, for instance, in the mass media, somebody says that Roman Kamaev becomes the financial minister for all the world, on the one hand, you have all the population of the Minister of Finance, as is. There are really very good people, young people, who see the world as a bright idea. So how can you make them come to you and not to somebody else, not to Gazprom, Google, Alibaba? What is going to be your recipe? Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm happy to welcome you here at the youth platform of the Financial Forum, and I quite hope that you are not yet tired from all the flow of financial information. If I become, okay, I'm the global financial minister. I'm responsible for everything. Okay, so the Ministry of Finance probably is not the key ministry in this respect, like acquisition and retention of young people in their staff. But if we're talking about the committee for youth, I would probably create some youth community, youth union. Look at the financial ministry. So, for instance, a young pretty girl comes to work for the Ministry of Finance. There are handsome or clever guys. Some of them are both. So how can they meet? How they can acquainted. So probably working together at the youth council, at the youth community. That's a joke, of course, at the Ministry of Finance. We don't have those shy girls who don't know how to accost a young person in the corridor. But simply speaking, I would say about my own example. 20 years ago, I came to the government office, the executive body of one of the constituent territories of the Russian Federation, and I was a student back then, so I was hired, but I looked quite differently at this work, and I started voicing my proposals. And my bosses were quite skeptical about my proposals, but since I was already a wise guy, I didn't want to step over their heads, and I just suppressed my proposals. But when we started as a youth council of young employees of that executive office, we collected all the proposals, and then we submitted these proposals to the young people. They were heard. So it's very important for the young people to be heard and to have a personal growth. So speaking about the motivators, this is one of the key factors, probably, participation in the joint results of the organization. That is quite a weight for young people, for the motivation of young people. So if we keep up with this motivation, that's the task for a manager, for the top guy in the organization, speaking about the results of the work, about the place of each particular person in this activity. So when they say, for instance, we have achieved this and that, many goals and so on, thanks to, and then enumerating the specific people who are responsible for the success. Then it's very important to arrange personal training. In some cases, people sort of look at it strangely. They come to work after the university with fresh knowledge. Why should they be retrained? How can we raise their qualification? But in order to prevent errors in their work, young people need to be immersed in the professional cases, in the activity that they are involved in, and that makes that allows very good team building, and that makes them wiser. They can avoid errors. And by all means, we need to think about entertainment, recreation, athletics, team buildings, outings, discotheques, outside of work. It's really great for young people, and we haven't yet spoken about it with some of the management. Probably in the government corporations, it's more difficult than in just commercial offices, because we had some ideas and we discussed them with some state corporations. We asked them to think about the entertainment, think about something outside of their working activities, and they say, no, it's not ours. It's probably not something that we should do because it is not conducive to work, but it can retain personnel, young personnel. And of course, a very interesting question and a very important question. Unfortunately, it's not very high in priority. Is this salary, low salaries? You already heard about this key factor from the mayor of Moscow and the minister of finance. If you take, for instance, Udmurtia, then for instance, if you take Rosimущество Udmurtia, the salary of an official is 30,000 rubles. It's average for the territory, and it's quite competitive. I used to work in Kostroma. It was also a federal agency that I worked at, but I was receiving the salary which was higher than my colleagues, and everyone was envious. Right now, the situation in Moscow is quite the contrary. The average is 80,000, and the government officials all the officials of the authorities, they are slightly lower. And the federal employees, for instance, they receive 30,000, and that's in Moscow. And that's a serious problem because that needs to be addressed in a very drastic way. And that's why this is something that we're discussing with the Ministry of Finance, with the President administration, because it's outside, it's beyond the power and capabilities of the Youth Council. So also housing, that's a very acute problem. The support for the young families, demographically, it's an acute issue, and that needs to be resolved too. Thank you very much, Roman. Frankly speaking, that's quite understandable, but it's very strange that you don't have finances since you're the global finance minister. Vitaly Fiveysky came up to us. He's Vasily Fiveysky. And we just want to introduce our next speaker. You are now in the global panel. You're the global Minister of Finance. How can you recruit young people to the global Minister of Finance? From the point of view of science, academic science, probably you have some ideas about it. So what do you think? It's easy for me to speak about the experience of the government of Moscow, of the city of Moscow, but I can speak from the point of view of the academia. Speaking about the government employees, we need to work in several directions to acquire young specialists, to make their work interesting, and we need to work on the image of the employer. That's in the past for the corporate sector, but if we are talking about the government authorities, we need to advertise for our positions because it's not done very often. It's this promotion of the government agencies, government service, it's not very well promoted. And we need to pay attention to it. That's number one. Then, if we're talking about educational technologies, one of the problems that I see is that the young specialists who graduate from various universities, they are not, let us say, fully ready to resolve the tasks that their employers want from them, including the government service. That's why the first period, after all the obstacles, competitions, and so on, the young person faces a situation when he needs a very serious adaptation, some retraining, then he needs to gain experience, not only professional, but the experience of communicating with people. What can be done in this way? We can and again, I am basing it on Moscow experience. We need to work with universities more extensively, probably have some hands-on training, probably workshops, professional orientation. This is something that should be a must. And money should be allocation for these hands-on trainings. This program should be built in such a way as to develop additional skills and competencies and to adapt the young people to their future work. And we can speak about the universal adaptation for all the employees or some specific adaptation for a particular industry that a young person is going to come into. There is another trend that needs to be taken into account because we live in the era of digital economy, a fast changing demand for skills and competences. So what they get at the universities becomes obsolete very often. Sometimes what they studied in their year one, year two, by the time they graduate, it may change. So when they come to work, the world is changing. They need to get more and more new knowledge. That's why probably we need to allocate some funding for creation of, let us say, environment or culture, educational environment, continuous self-education. And in some cases, in some structures, it is more or less successful. Some are making only the first steps. I think that needs to be resolved at the government level, but only within this framework of continuous education. And this is the only way to make it possible, because people may change the directions of their activities. There are some projections, but probably 10 to 12 times young people will have to change the direction of their activities. And it's not like it used to be 30, 40 years ago when they graduated from their respective universities, and then there was continuous growth within practically the same sector, the same industry. Now the system is becoming more and more flexible, mobile, so I would pay attention to these. Well, we are moving gradually to the topic. We started talking about a person in a system, how to be part of the system, and HR branding. But now we are coming to the idea that within the system, a person needs to be a professional. Now Natalia Garkusha will speak about the competences that people need to be successful within the chosen system. It's quite obvious that if your boss likes what you are doing, you'll be much in demand in the industry. So you have full authority to change whatever you like globally. So what would you suggest for the future, for the past, for everything? Thank you very much, Robert. Dear friends, I want to greet you, Natalia Gargusha. Most part of my life I've been in education, and for the last 10 years I'm a project manager, a small project manager, and large global projects of management, and I'm a consultant, and I'm a teacher, instructor in these projects, so I enjoy it very much. So I would like to speak about the tools that, as I think, would allow a more successful, I would say, adaptation of young professionals to the new structures. The interest of the young professional may be connected to two positions. First, interesting and potentially and a great potential of development, and very good financial conditions. Well, financial conditions are obvious, but what kind of work should he have to be developed, and whom should we hire? This is the approach to the projects. How good is the approach? I prepared several slides for the presentation, so the first thing I wanted to say, actually I wanted to ask a question. Do you like quests, colleague? What is a quest? It's a chain of tasks, and you say, yeah, we like it. Why do you like it? Because it's interesting. You can achieve goals. It's educational. So can you raise your hands, those who don't like quests? Have you ever tried to play quests? That's awful. So the rest of the audience are interested in quests. I recommend you only find the right one. Now, another question. Dear friends, are you interested in projects? Yeah. Not so enthusiastic as about quests. Then another question. Do you like projects as I like projects? No. And by the way, if you look at the comparison between quests and projects, it all depends on the approach. Between the quest and the project, there is a very tight link because, first of all, they are given by people, either the management group or a person. Then there are tasks. Then there are results, which is very good because you want to achieve results and goals. So if we position our work as a serious quest now, a very interesting, exciting quest, and everything depends only on us, then our activity, professional activity, will become more interesting. And we do understand very clearly that we're engrossed in our work, takes a lot of time in our life, but life itself is full of our personal projects. If you look at our projects, studies, family, career, material goods, and so on, these are all projects, and they all have stages like the professional projects because we're planning something, we are doing something to implement, we implement, and so on. The question is, are we all ready to work for results? If I was building a team of personnel with high potential, I would only choose people who do understand clearly what kind of results they want to obtain at the end. If we're talking about the future, then we need to understand that today's projects and the projects that we're going to implement a year from now, 2 years from now, they're going to be different in their content. The tools may be the same as maybe 50 years ago, the management instruments were the same, but the people are changing. And if you look at the generations, at the characteristics of the organization, of the characters of the people, different generations, so look who is going to be the managers of projects. They're going to have totally different qualities. If you look at the Generation Z, then the very important parameter is this personnel characteristics. It's very important. The most important are personal qualities. I think that the personal qualities are going to even override the professional qualities, because professional qualities can be acquired during training, during hands-on practice and so on, but the personal qualities, they need to be developed from the very start, from childhood. And they're different than in the previous generations. We live in a digital world which changes our apprehension of what we do. And if the system of education is not transformed as quickly as the generations are changing, unfortunately, the system won't be able to do anything for our personal development and self-realization. That's why thinking about these problems, in order to build a team, successful project teams, we started developing a very serious model of competencies of the stakeholders in the project activities, irrespective of what kind of projects they are, any professional project. And we are not doing something which was the task of yesterday. We're working on the competences that are going to be in demand tomorrow. This model of competences can be built on the highly qualified professional with potential development people. These competencies are still being developed, but I think it's a wonderful basis now for further development of various activities, various directions in various industries.
But we cannot possibly escape any form of competition, of contests. Contests make it possible to promote yourself, to show the level of personal development. Apart from that, contests boost your personal development. That is why next year we plan to organize a contest, Project Manager 2019, which will help us find new stars on the sky of project management. So I invite young professionals, young experts, and I believe that the winners, the prize winners of this contest, will become part of my team, will work together with me in order to manage various projects, state service projects, and other projects. That is why, colleagues, I urge you to utilize this tool that will let you develop your personalities. I'd like to wish each one of you successful projects and great results. Thank you. Well, you have advertised some contests. This is an interesting approach. You were the first speaker to address the audience, and actually, in the middle of our discussion, we wanted to start a small survey. I guess everybody in this hall has downloaded special application to participate in this survey. For us, it's important to understand what category of population you represent here, so please choose a category from the list. How much time do you need? A minute? 2? Okay, let it be 2 minutes. Well, we have 2 civil servants that make up 62%.
Судя по темпам голосования,
Judging by the tempo of vote, it is still in process, so you have 1 extra minute.
ну слушай. Коллеги, кто-то есть, кто еще голосует?
Colleagues, anybody else who is still voting?
Предприниматель остался.
1 entrepreneur left.
Уважаемые коллеги, давайте
All right, colleagues, let us finish it. Or do we have first and third categories strongly related to state and government are strongly represented? Only few researchers, few members of commercial sector, few entrepreneurs. So let us take another approach to discussion. We've talked about state executive authorities, but let us think not only about state sector. That is why my next question goes to Madam Tatiana Seliverstova. We know that you have multiple projects on the development of business, society, and entrepreneurship. Is it possible to join entrepreneurship and state and civil service? Thank you for this question. It is a good one. I have watched the survey. In Russian Youth Union, we work with all the categories of young people. I'm responsible for international cooperation. I'm responsible for working young people. I mean graduates of higher education institutions, of colleges, for professional studies. Our colleagues have already talked about it, about the fact that the knowledge that students get during their education are not sufficient in order to help the graduate find themselves in bigger companies and organizations. That is why it's important to teach students deal with project management. When bigger regional companies come to universities, and put forward certain requirements of what should be done in order to increase the investment potential of the region. We believe that young experts should be ready starting from their studies. For example, I am a graduate of Moscow State University, and I had excellent marks in all of my courses, but I never showed my certificate to any of my employers. In 75 regions of Russia, we have our offices, our chapters, and we know too good all the problems of young people related to adaptation of young professionals to their working places and so on and so forth. We do not stagnate. On daily basis, we create new projects, raise funds, establish project teams that always include young people, average age 21, 22 people. So Russian Union of Young People, in our central committee, there are 65 people, and 70% of them are young people of 23, 24 years of age. So we focus on young professionals. Modern world is getting more and more global, and if we fail to teach our young people what trends are there on the international arena, what paths of development are there for humanitarian action, for social activities. In this case, a person may fail to promote their personal development. That's why, starting from 2016, we started to implement international youth project, Business Incubator. This is a platform that aims to create international business cases for international entrepreneurship projects. In 2016, we started to cooperate with China. Starting from 1993, we have been maintaining positive relations with Chinese Youth Union, and in 2016, in Pacific State University, we opened this first sort of business incubator. During the first month of its activity, young people from Russia and from China, specially selected, who can participate: students, young researchers, civil servants. The main criterion is being under 30 years of age. For 2 weeks, people get trainings on the peculiarities of business in Russia and in China, and then they are off to practice in a Chinese business incubator. As of today, the number of such platforms has increased 20-fold, and under support of Federal Agency for Affairs of Young People, under support of regional authorities, such platforms are active in 11 cities of Russian Federation and 10 cities of China. Why are those projects unique? They're unique because young people get the necessary knowledge and expertise required to be active as businessmen in China and needed to attract investment to their projects. Here is an example. In Ulyanovsk last year, 2 young members of this incubator, of this platform, managed to attract investment to Ulyanovsk region to build a factory on a special form of wrapping used in food industry. As a matter of fact, they have attracted investment to an absolutely new branch, which is safe to be used in food industry. Please do not forget that now you perform as Minister of Finance. Well, the thing is that now we maintain strong correlation with regional authorities, and we communicate the message. If you do not give them an opportunity to increase their personal development, we can give them an opportunity to do real economic activities. We teach them how to export their production, their goods and services. As of now, In Russia, there is a real young group of young experts who are big specialists and professionals who can be active in business in Russia as well as in China. This year, we have also launched incubator at the area of SCO countries. We start incubator joint venture of Russian and Uzbekistan, Russia and Kazakhstan, Russia and Belarus, two lateral incubators with Georgia, Kyrgyzstan and other countries. What is it about? I want to say that we shouldn't deprive our young people of the opportunities to deal with international business. This category of population should be trained, it should be taught, it should be trained not to go abroad and start their business there. We have to train them how to start their business in their own domestic region. And in this regard, we cooperate with regional authorities who require qualified experts and specialists, because today there are too few highly qualified professionals who could deal with international negotiations, international economic activities. This is what we have to teach them to do. Then, digital economy is developing fast today, and only about 15% of all the young people understand what is digital economy. I believe that the government today pays little attention to retraining, requalifying of young specialists, of young experts. There is no such system. Russian Union for Young People, together with a group of commercial companies, have established a foundation, another piece of advertisement. We name it Academy for Startups and Blockchain Technologies. On the 15th of September, we start a all-Russian nationwide contest. We will be looking for best projects based on blockchain technology. There is a foundation that will have an opportunity to invest about 10 million rubles in the best projects, so we invite everyone to participate. My message is, today, you should not be afraid that young people start to think globally. We should not be afraid that they will open chapters of their companies abroad. We should not be afraid that they can expand their projects towards global markets. Unfortunately, there are sanctions and sanction policy executed against us, but it has nothing to do with young people who establish their startups, who develop IT and other tracks and technologies. Russia proves that Russian experts are ready to work, to cooperate. We are ready to view international track as our priority, and it should be headed by young leaders. Thank you. Well, the landscape is quite sophisticated. Brand new world of international business on one side, and we're not afraid of sanctions, as you've said, but at the same time, it's obvious that state, civil service, and power authorities will compete to gain best young experts and professionals. My next question goes to Maxim Merkulov. What is your position? What is correlation with your previous position? What are the trends of a global community that our state governmental system lacks? Just imagine that you have all the possible authority. What would you do? Thank you. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for an opportunity to have a word here at such a representational panel. I'd like to share my private experience. Before I start to represent Vnesheekonombank as a state corporation. If I may, without further ado, I'd like to talk about what I personally am bothered about and what will help us get people who participate in international trainings back. How can we win them back to Russia? I'll turn to two major issues. First, the opinion that it's impossible to get into civil service solely due to your personal qualities. Second issue is more sophisticated, more complex. How can a young specialist, a young expert, get a transparent career growth based on the results of their professional activity, on their personal development, and on other aspects that will help them build a correct trajectory of their life? Let us start with the first issue. Why do I think that the first question is simpler? Because we have already started to tackle it. We have really efficient tools to give incentives to young experts and to attract them to civil service. I'd like to speak about the project Russia's Leaders, a resource that has proven to be a success. I have personally participated in semifinals of this contest. I can tell you for sure that people who previously didn't have an opportunity to work with civil servants, for people who work in private companies, in private sector, after several days of communicating with civil servants, those people absolutely changed their mind about civil service. This transformation of opinion and of their approach towards civil service was the thing that I personally witnessed. And this is very positive. I believe this is not incidental, and the desire of bosses to employ only their relatives or friends is a faulty one. Once I had to look for an employee in one of state services, and I did not get a single proposal from HR department of this body. And what did I have to do? I had to call my friends and my relatives, because what else could I do? And actually, such cases maintain this myth afloat that state service and your promotion there are not related to your personal qualities. Well, I'd like to say this is not so. Today I see the incentives that can drive young people to start the civil service. But let us suppose that you are a young professional and you have, so to speak, entered the office of a civil servant. And what do people see there? Well, first of all, salary which cannot compete with salaries present elsewhere at the market. Secondly, lack of clear system of career growth. Today's system of accountability that should assess and evaluate professional activities of employees enshrines such educations as the amount of outgoing mail, number of ingoing mail, number of documents composed. So these are indicators that cannot help us evaluate the efficiency of a worker. Then there are restrictions and non-tolerance of project principle of work. What do we have? Any initiative can be punished today. That is why young professionals hesitate to fully unravel their potential. If a young man starts their civil service and they're very motivated, very soon they will lose all their motivation, they will lose all their desire to develop, because what they face at civil service is red tape, bureaucracy, numerous cliches. I believe we cannot afford losing this human capital that we attract to civil service. We have to pay specific attention to the development of those young specialists, of this human capital. We should not just take as granted or use what we have until the knowledge gets old-fashioned. I believe that in the years to come, knowledge will become old-fashioned too soon, and there will be increasing need to launch non-stop education of civil servants and all other specialists and experts. You might say that when making their choice for civil service, people understand what they are up to, and they have to embrace all the consequences. Well, I disagree. I will not comment on salaries, but I'd like to comment on career prospects and initiatives that might be punished.
In one of the federal ministries, the HR issued a recommendation about forbidding the fast career growth of the employees because it leads to the decrease of the authority. And it's not just one separate HR, it's a general reflection of the approach in the civil service to the career growth, unfortunately. In this case, it's not about the formulation that we can see the problem, but it's the need to create a comprehensive approach, to create a culture which will be based on competences of the personnel. And then we'll see the moment when we will switch from the task order kind of work to the initiatives in work. And of course, the role of HR, the HR department in many ministries, now their functions are limited to probably accounting and recording and so on. It has nothing to do with the career growth or promotion of human capital. And here, of course, one of the solutions that we might have here is to further promote the project management. We shouldn't probably rush after the fashionable American methodologies, Agile, Scrum, and so on. We can do it, but we need to first understand the basis of the project management without replacing it with the fashionable words. We need to set up specific goals and objectives for the projects so that the specific goals at the top level of the management of the project should be accompanied by the delegation of authority so that those who specifically implement the project could choose their own way of action, implementing the ideas of the project, and that will lead to creative initiative, and the implementation of the project will be actually acceptable to the Z generation, because we're going to face the Z generation more and more in the civil service and elsewhere. I can actually draw an analogy with the financial instrument that is launched by Vneshekonombank, and this is the project of social impact bonds. What is the analogy? Implementing these projects, the government only identified the target, the effect that should be achieved at the end of the project. But how to achieve this depends only on the implementers of the project. And it works because the government pays for the project only if the effect is achieved. How it is done? Well, of course, nothing outside of the legal field, but It's actually promoting initiatives, innovative technologies, and methods that probably are not always in demand during the regulated processes of civil service. And I want to say that it's not only important to create the conditions and the interest of the people in civil service, it's much more important to create conditions for their development and their successful activity when they're already on the jobs. Thank you very much, Robert. Can I say a couple of words? Because I have some ideas that I want to complement. Maxim said that motivation of ideas of the civil servants, it's probably can be done by financially. And I want to quote some example from Belgorod experience. I was participating in one of the projects there because I'm very briefly, please. But the question is the motivation of financial motivation for good ideas. That's possible. In Belgorod, they implemented the system of incentives for generation of project ideas. Civil servant can propose an idea, and of course there should be some format for admittance, but if it is accepted, he or she gets a bonus. So this is the incentive for the development of the civil servants, and also it's a tangible bonus. Yeah. Yeah, that is, we are speaking in stages, because first we're talking about how to acquire and retain people in the project, how to motivate by goals, by money, and Maxim showed the business approach to it. Okay, here is the goal, and I don't care how you reach this, and the quality control should be present. But in some of the presentations, consistently, you were repeating either the myths or the truth or the practices. Now, I want to give the floor to the disruptor of the legends, so to say, or the person who, besides the fact of his being the advisor to the ministers of labor and social security, but he's been at the head of the Young Specialist Council since 2011. Philip, I want to see your wild nature. Okay, you're the labor minister, global labor minister, and global finance minister. What are your proposals? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I want to thank for this opportunity to speak in this venue. I really find it very pleasant to be on this site, because it's the Youth Council of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. Robert has already introduced me, so I'm not going to repeat his introduction. I want to say that if we're talking about disruption or in some way doubt about some myths that the esteemed colleagues have pronounced, we don't see a large deficit of people coming to the civil service. We are the Minister of Labor of the Russian Federation. We have been working actively with students, and many students who have the hands-on training. Let us take the federal agencies, federal bodies of power. They remain in these organizations. We have a department where it is really streamlined, because the load is really very high as compared to the Soviet time in Russia, because the load per one employee, and the students are our great helpers. They help us to work, and a great problem is not to attract them, but the problem is retain and motivate them. and to correctly promote their careers. I'm talking about the people who come to our civil service institution. This is a big problem. I wouldn't say that we have a problem with the professional growth. If you just measure what used to be, what is now, so how many years it used to require from a specialist to climb the career steps 20 years ago and now, we will see quite a significant dynamic growth, positive growth, positive career growth for some people. If they have specific competencies and specific knowledge, they can really climb the ladder very quickly, including the civil service. Speaking about the quality that they must have and the qualities that are now in demand, I would say that, of course, I would say professional industrial growth is very important. It has always been important. As a Ministry of Labor, we have developed the qualification register, which lists all the skills and competencies if you want to take a position in civil service. It's been upgraded and updated continuously, and it embraces not only the competencies within our ministry, but comprehensively the civil service. I've already mentioned that it's been updated. We work with organizations because when they train students, they would look at this register of competencies and they would customize their training. Of course, it's very important to update it from time to time because everything is changing quickly and some of the competencies and some of the skills may become obsolete very quickly. But based on this registry, we develop the requirements for taking this or that position. You can look up on our website. There are professional standards. Can I ask you a provocative question? So the answer is everything is great. Everything has been done. So what can we take from this? No, not everything is great. And it goes saying that there are problems. For instance, competitive salaries. I'm trying to find the correct wording. Assurance, I would call it, assurance of results. Because right now we are at the junction of the project management, and we are trying to implement some things that will be applicable in the civil service, KPI, and so on. They're based on quantities, not on the results. Because this is something that is done just for the tick off, and that's it. It's not something that we are inventing. It's something that shows us the direction of growth, the direction of development. And our colleagues actually spoke about digitalization of economy, and this is a very important significance presently. And Tatiana has already mentioned, and Vasily has already mentioned, that we are making huge leaps towards digitalization. On the one hand, it's a competitive advantage because they're really competitive as compared to the young specialists 40 years ago. And indeed, they used to need training. Right now, they can train the old age pensioners, because with the raising of the pension age, they're going to work for a long time because, you know, they need some retraining as well. of course, on the one hand, it's the advantage. On the other hand, this is it's a drawback. Professional competences, actually, in digital economy, for instance, working with open data, they need some training. They need some education there. So I want to summarize. I want to, in wild stroke, I want to mention some universal things for the young professionals that are important for the young professionals, and what I see, in my personal opinion, I think one of the requirements is the ability to work with the digital and other modern technologies, as well as the ability to communicate at every level of communication, because we're in the middle of a process. I'm a secretary of the Public Council at our ministry, and next week we're going to refresh our composition. We're going to select new people to our expert council. And related to that, I think that it's very important for every employee, not only the top guys, but everyone. They need to know how to communicate with the public. In the Soviet time, 20 years ago, it was not a requirement. The civil service was sort of separate from the society, God's plan, and so on. But now we see the movement forward. Even when we came to the civil service, there was no communication that was that tight. Now, the gap between society and power has been bridged, and every civil servant needs to know how to communicate with the public. This is second. And this is something that is universal for all civil servants. As well as communication technologies. We have already mentioned the communication technologies. They're related to globalization of our world, to the raised intensity of a communication and communication skills. They become very important because every issue probably touches a lot of ministries, a lot of agencies, both government and public organizations, and you need to build communication in the shortest time to collect the information and to come up with the results. So proceeding from that, the young civil servant needs to need to have a very broad outlook, like panoramic outlook for this communication. And of course, the multitasking, which is very important. They need to be able to be involved in many tasks, or probably do one task which will cover all the rest of the tasks. So these are the aspects which, to my mind, are very important for the civil servant. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, it's time to summarize because we have one vote, and it's also going to be aimed at our audience. You've seen different approaches to how the people who have certain competencies and certain authority, how they are going to use you in civil service, how they're going to attract you, acquire you, retain you, and so on, using different mechanisms. So the last questions. So if you don't know digital, of course, you don't have any role in this proposition. But I'm not talking about competences, actually, but what about the meta skills, let us say, that you can offer to the global Minister of Finance? And after that, we'll end up this lecture. No one wants to be the leader. Multitasking, that's on the top, probably because we have very many civil servants here with us. They consider it very important to be able to multitask. Have you all voted? Is anyone left out yet? Let's summarize. So mostly we've heard about how to attract the young professionals, and the young professionals themselves, they say, okay, you're going to give us multiple tasks and they're going to overload us. And the world is changing very much. It's like, wow, it has happened. So the young professionals are ready for this sudden change of events.
And we, dear colleagues, probably have to organize more close cooperation with young people. But I believe that ultimately the developments will be positive. Thank you for attending this lecture. I believe that our today's discussion was very useful. If you have any questions, you have an opportunity to ask them. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody. This is not a question, I understand. I have a question to you, Vasily, about the project and the experience of the city of Moscow. Apart from this program, apart from what Moscow does, what other tools, what other new project can be held here in this city? Are there any plans in your institution to launch some new projects? What is your assessment of role of new young professionals? What do you think they're going to choose? State service, state corporations, business, what? Okay, thank you. I didn't pay enough attention to it in the major part of my speech. It is understandable that we, the government of Moscow and our university, cooperates with young people, attracts them to various professions. One of the most popular variants is internship in the government of Moscow. This project has been going on for 7 years already. It's about the following. We invite graduates of universities and a third or fourth year students or students of any year of master's studies. We invite them to our structure. This internship goes on for 9 months. In the course of this period, they have an opportunity to work in 3 state bodies. For example, administration of mayor, government of Moscow, and so on and so forth. They have an opportunity to work in 3 such organizations. We have already worked with more than 600 graduates. We have extended the number of people whom we invite. The competition was 80 persons for 1 place. This year the competition might go down because the number of places for participants has been increased. Young people who were chosen to participate in this internship, they receive salary, which is quite competitive, and they have an opportunity to combine studies with work. Each of them have individual schedule, and the condition is to work in our structures 20 hours a week. All of them have their mentors and tutors. The mayor of Moscow personally meets groups of trainees. He produces feedback. I may go on listing. You know that Moscow has been actively development in all the key projects. For example, Zaryadia Park, exhibition center and other projects engage young specialists who have accomplished our internship. They have an opportunity to come to us with their own project and try to defend it in front of their mentors and tutors and later on to implement it. If they don't have a project of their own, they can join the projects that already exist there. We believe that this practice is a success because 80% of our interns are invited to work with us even before they finish their internship. Sometimes several employers want to hire them, and it is also good for employers because it is a sort of a prolonged testing period where you can see whom you want to hire. About 80% of our interns are later on hired here in Moscow, in our structures, and the remaining 20%, well, they might go to business sector or somewhere else. Ultimately, all of them work for the good of our city and of our country. The school that they go through is very positive. We've been doing it for 7 years already, and 30% of all the people who stayed in our structures, 30% of them changed their place of work in the course of 2 years. However, nearly all of them express a desire to get back if the conditions are corresponding. And we have touched upon the topic of salary. This is important. Though Moscow is quite a rich entity of Russian Federation, and Moscow employees generally are satisfied with their salary. However, we have to bear in mind that competition at the labor market here is immense, and everybody wants to win young specialists, and to attract them solely with money would be very difficult. But money is not the only thing that young people are interested in. It's important to participate in interesting projects, to promote themselves. For example, we have people who want to be operative in the cultural sector, and we give them such an opportunity. For example, we trained people who participated in the organization of FIFA Football World Cup. The opportunities that they have develop exponentially. 9 months of internship give them unique experience, and after that, they are completely new people. They are new people for the labor market, and they can be utilized in an absolutely different manner. They have an opportunity to participate in interesting projects they can develop, and for them, this is as much important as the salary, as the money they get. I hope I have covered your question. I also have a question for Vasily. I represent the district of Zelenograd, Korbova Anna. Recently, government of Moscow adopted strategy Smart City 2030, which sets ambitious goals, and I'd like to ask you whether the university suggests preparing programs to improve qualification of civil servants to fit those new tracks: smart city, neurotechnologies, blockchain, big data, virtual augmented reality, so that state servants could use it. Yes, this year we have launched a chain of workshops for managers on tracks that you have mentioned: blockchain, big data, and so on and so forth. We have started it in a pilot regime, and starting from the next year, we plan to launch those programs on a solid basis. So we do plan to do so, really. Now we're trying to suit into the developments that go on in the city of Moscow. There is a project, Active Citizen, carried out on the basis of blockchain technology. Those projects are going to be more and more numerous. We have one more question. Good afternoon. I will stay here if you don't mind. I have a question for Philip. I represent High School of Economics. In the federal law that stipulates the position of foreign citizens, there is an article about the employment of foreign students, and though this law exists, many of foreign students do not know about it. High School of Economics have launched a program to facilitate the employment of foreign students to state, to public and private sector. However, I understand that foreign citizens cannot work with public sector, and my question is the following. Why are so few companies and HR departments aware of this law, and why it is still so difficult for foreign students to be employed, because they have to apply for working permit, they have to get many licenses, many permits, and it's very difficult. So your question is about the access of foreign students to public sector. Yes, there is such an experience in the United States of America. I had internship in Federal Reserve there. Probably we could pick up this experience and give opportunity to best foreign students of our universities and launch such projects to have internships in public sector. Well, we proceed from the assumption that actually we are not alone. There are many countries that do not envisage such an opportunity. Well, the United States are not among them. But the rule for us is civil service in Russia is only for Russian citizens. Same with, for example, positions in State Duma and self-government authorities and regional authorities. There are norms, rules, and regulations that we cannot violate. Why do we not change them? Well, we can think about it as long as we want to, but, well, the answer here is very simple. You just adopt Russian citizenship and you have such an opportunity. Thank you, colleagues. Let us ask our last question. Mikhail Balgin, civil servant. I have a question for Mr. Merkulov, but it's open for any of panelists. How can ordinary civil servants with low salary and high motivation, who understand that we do a great job and all of us will perform our functions in our departments and our divisions, what is your advice to us? What is the perspective that we have to see in front of us, and what is the way, what are the tools for us, for ordinary civil servants who do not have an opportunity to participate in internships, to go abroad and practice? What is your recommendation to civil servants who want to work for the good of the country but do not have such opportunities? What would you advise? Thank you for this question. I will address my private experience. When I was just an ordinary civil servant, what motivated me? What gave me incentives? First of all, if you talk about it, it means that you are already highly motivated. It means that you understand that the projects that you deal with are very important. It means that you understand that when implementing the projects that you deal with, even though you might not be a manager of this project. What I want to say is that if you see the result of your work, of your job, and if you are satisfied with the result, it is the most important thing there is. The second question is the tasks that you set forth, the goals you see. Those goals should correspond to your ambition, to your professional aspirations that you have now. This is the problem I have touched upon. I believe we pay little attention to it. Our HR departments pay little attention to this issue. Inside a ministry, nobody talks about a person, about a personality and their motivation and their incentives. It's been said that there are sufficient resources, human resources, for civil service, and in case we do not have this individual, we will have another one. And probably someone will ask a question, why should we try to keep them? Why should we attract them and engage them? But this is an absolutely different approach. If we talk about the personal development of our personnel, we should think about our future, about our perspective, and we have to count on the people we have and hope that they will stay with us. That is why it is important. International and corporate practice tackle this issue, and here I would not divide corporate practice from governmental practice, because those two aspects could share same tools and practices that have proven to be effective. Those practices can be similar for both sectors. And getting back to the issue of our mission, of your mission, and of your goals, of the results of your work, this is what's going to motivate you each and every day. You are a civil servant, and apparently the financial aspect of your work is not first priority for you. Then it means that the goals, the results of your work, this is what motivates you, and that you accomplish your personal growth through it. I agree that we have sufficient resources of personnel for civil service. However, there is a problem of how to attract the best, the most prospective people. If you talked about getting additional competences and skills that might not be directly related to your professional duties, I'd like to comment on that. When I was on my way here, Robert gave me a phone call and asked me about the topic of my presentation. I said that I would like to talk about our organization, and he was against it. He just wanted me to answer his question. And now I see that this was a good approach. Now I'd like to urge everybody who has not still been logged in our federal system of young people, please do it. Find this system, and by logging in, you will have an opportunity to get information about projects, about volunteer projects. And as you know, this year has been declared by the President of the Russian Federation as a year of volunteer. It was done in order to make this track more robust, more actively developing, and to attract more people to such movements. Now, in Tula region, there is a forum, Volunteers of the Victory. It is one of many volunteer movements that has brought together more than 100,000 people. Those are people representing various ages, social groups. They take care of veterans. They study history. They learn about veterans, about heroes, and several average age of a member of this movement is 21 years. So this is an average student by age. Apart from that, you will have an opportunity to get information on grants, contests, and this year the volume of financial support via grants to students has increased eightfold. So There you will have an opportunity to submit your projects and to win money prize to implement your project, to try an absolutely new area of operation and activity, or to somehow correlate it to what you are currently doing. Apart from that, you will be able to improve the environment in your team, in your group. Apart from that, I'd like to wish you every success. I urge everybody to build confidence and trust, because trust means a lot. If you trust each other, the citizens of our country trust us. One more minor comment. I absolutely agree with what my colleague has said. Indeed, nowadays there are multiple contests of projects, and sometimes here in Moscow we do not search for a new employee, but for a new expert. And if you have a number of areas of expertise where you are very experienced, skilled, and you can conduct workshops, act as a mentor or tutor for groups of trainees, we will be interested in you, and we post information about such events at our official website, at the website of the government of Moscow. We invite speakers, and we might invite you, and it could be a very interesting start for you. For example, in our university, we have our University Saturdays, where we invite various speakers to deliver short speeches on defined topics. These events gather big audiences, and those workshops are quite popular. And this is a good step to start with. Yes, thank you, distinguished colleagues. Let us welcome our speakers with a round of applause. It was difficult to mind the time frame. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this meeting. Hopefully it was very useful to all of you. All the best.
Спасибо. Спасибо, Наталья. Спасибо большое.